Good afternoon, Mr. Sassounian. We are in Tel Aviv today. We've been participating in the conference that is taking place in Tel Aviv, organized by the Open University of Israel. And this is the first time that the conference actually about the topic of the Armenian Genocide is taking place in Israel in general. And you are one of the participants who made a speech yesterday. So I would like to ask you, in general terms, about your opinion of this conference, of the experience that you have had here, and why this is important for us Armenians.
Well, as you said, this is the first time that there's a conference entirely on the Armenian Genocide and at the Open University. So I was honored to be part of it and give a speech on the Armenian Genocide. And I'm glad I came because it turns out that I was one of the very few Armenians invited to speak. And unfortunately, some Armenians that were invited to speak, they didn't show up, especially from Armenia, which is sad. But at least I was there, and I spoke about the genocide, and I spoke also about Israel's not recognition of the Armenian genocide, which is an important subject. My speech basically was about where we are today in terms of our demands, because for almost 100 years we have pursued the issue of genocide recognition. In my opinion, and this is what I presented, we have enough recognition, and just having more countries recognized will not give us anything. We need to pursue our legal demands from the government of Turkey, and we can do that by going to international courts, going to World Court, going to European Court of Human Rights, or country courts in different countries. So that's where we are. We should not anymore ask people to recognize. Now, if they recognize, that's fine. We're grateful, we accept it. And I also spoke especially about the government of Israel. As we know, government of Israel for years, for a long time, they haven't been recognized genocide.
The government of Israel.
The government, because of strategic interest with Turkey, for years they were such strategic allies. But in recent years, there have been a lot of hostility between Turkey and Israel. And everybody expected that because of that hostility, the Israeli government will be freer to recognize genocide and not worry about Turkey because already the relations are bad. But we are seeing that the Israeli government continues to block any recognition by the Knesset, by the Israeli parliament. And it's a puzzle why the government of Turkey, Israel, continues to block genocide recognition when we know that all the Israeli citizens, the overwhelming majority, they're very upset at Turkey because Turkish President Erdogan says very anti-Israeli comments he makes, and Turkish papers write anti-Semitic articles. So I did some research to find out what is really behind this very strange behavior by the Prime Minister and the Foreign Ministry. And I find out that what is really behind the Israeli government's position is not Turkey, but it's Azerbaijan. Because Azerbaijan sells a lot of oil and gas to Israel. I think 40% of Israel's oil and gas comes from Azerbaijan. And also Azerbaijan buys billions of dollars of weapons. Missiles, other weapons, drones, etc. So their annual trade is about $5 billion, which is a lot of money.
Isn't Israel the largest provider of weapons to Azerbaijan, as far as I know?
Well, no, Azerbaijan gets, one of them, Azerbaijan gets a lot of weapons from two sources. One is Russia, the other one is Azerbaijan. One is Russia, the other one is Israel. And so that's why Israeli government is so sensitive not to upset their business partner, which is very immoral because it has nothing to do with genocide. This genocide, something happened 100 years ago, they should have no relation to today's problems. And no one's accusing today's Turkey of committing genocide. It was the Ottoman Empire. But there is a very wrong approach So I spoke about that, and I said Israel should have been the first country to recognize, not the last country, because Israelis and Jews suffered the Holocaust, so they should have more sympathy to another people that suffered genocide. But I made a distinction between the government of Israel, which pursues political interests, and the people of Israel, who are more sincere and honest, and many Israelis and many Jews around the world, they support the Armenian Genocide. I gave the example of some big names like Ambassador Henry Morgenthau, a Jewish American ambassador to Ottoman Empire during the genocide. I gave the example of Franz Werfel, who wrote the 40 Days of Musadov. He was an Austrian Jewish novelist. And I gave the example of Raphael Lemkin, who coined the term genocide. You know, he was a Polish Jewish attorney. So I also give an example of, from today's history, Professor Israel Charny, Professor Yair Oron, Professor Yehuda Bauer, and a lot of the Knesset members for years who've been struggling to get the Knesset to recognize, but every time the government blocks the recognition. Of course, today's President of Israel, President Rivlin, when he was the chairman of the Knesset, he was a very strong advocate for recognition by the Knesset. So it is not that a lot of Jews are against us, but they're not. A lot of Jews are for us. It's just that the government, I think, wrongly, is still continuing to deny the genocide.
Today in the morning, you and the participants of the conference, including yourself, had a meeting with President Rivlin. What are your impressions from the meeting, and what are the key points that you would like to highlight about it?
Well, this is the first time I meet him, so I found the president to be a very nice man, very kind man, very pro-Armenian. He loves Armenians. He championed the Armenian Genocide recognition in Knesset for many years. And he told us very honestly, he said, as an individual, I know what happened. There's no doubt in my mind what happened. You know, he said, but as president, because the government has a different position, my hands are tied, so I cannot say the word. So he called it tragedy, he called the massacres, and he said, let's leave it to historians. And, but at the end, when he was talking, he said Armenian Genocide. And so it's, on one hand, I'm impressed by his nice character, very humane character. On the other hand, I'm disappointed because as president, if he thinks saying genocide is the right thing to do, he should say it.
Yes.
If he thinks that the government of Israel should recognize the genocide, he should say it. He should not be scared of saying, because there's nothing they can do to him. He's the president of the country. The prime minister has no power over him. They're not going to fire him or dismiss him. So I think he should have a little strength. So I hope that this meeting today, 1 hour meeting with him, and we spend most of the time talking about genocide. He said, I'm born and raised in Jerusalem. I know a lot of Armenians. They were survivors of genocide. So I know firsthand, there's no doubt in my mind what it is.
Okay.
But he kept avoiding the word because of the government. He doesn't want to say anything that goes against the government's position. But I took this opportunity to ask the president a couple of other things besides genocide recognition. I also must say that I have a book which lists different countries that have recognized the Armenian Genocide, and I showed him the book, and I said there's one page missing in this book, the page belonging to Israeli government recognized the genocide. So he understood and he smiled. The other thing that we talked about, I talked to him about when I had a chance to talk to him. I told him that he should make an official visit to Armenia as president of Israel, because I think if he goes there, it will be a different atmosphere, and maybe he will say things that he would not say normally when he's in Israel. In Armenia, during his visit, he would say things. I also told him that a lot of Armenians would like to come and visit the Jerusalem Armenian Patriarchate and Jerusalem, the holy sites, as the first Christian nation. But it's very difficult for Armenians to visit here because they have to go to Tbilisi, Georgia, to get a visa, and because Israel does not have an embassy in Yerevan. So I asked him if it would be possible for citizens of Armenia to fly to Tel Aviv and then get a visa at the airport. And that's what happens to Russians. Russian tourists, they get their visa at the airport in Tel Aviv, and Georgians also get their visa. And Georgians is strange because Georgians, there's an Israeli embassy in Tbilisi, they can get a visa. So even though there's an embassy, they can get a visa, they still can visa here. Armenians don't have an embassy and they can't get a visa here. So it's a lot of inconvenience.
So the function of the Georgian embassy basically becomes to give visa to Armenians.
Yeah, to Armenians, yeah, and then Armenians have to go all the way there. So he said, I didn't know that. He said, I didn't know that Armenians can't get a visa at the airport. So right away on the spot, he ordered his aides to look into it and make arrangements so that Armenians don't have to come with a visa. So if this happens,
it's a good point.
I'm going to get the credit for it.
Sure.
We also discussed, because I come from Glendale, California, where there's a large Armenian community, as everybody knows, and I asked him if Glendale and the Israeli city can be sister cities. So he said yes, we'll look into that. So we talked about many things, not just...
constructive suggestions.
Yeah, he made some suggestions, and he was very open to it. And I think he's happy, as long as we don't discuss genocide, he's happy that he's willing to do anything to make Armenians happy.
Yes, his personal position being different from the official position resembles also what Obama was saying about him personally believing that it was a genocide. I should say.
But you know, I would like to say, let me say something. When you're president of a country, you cannot say, personally I believe this, but as president I believe this. You can't have two different beliefs. It should be the same thing. You know, I can't, for example, write one thing as an editor of a newspaper, and then I tell you, no, I believe something else opposite personally.
It sort of makes...
Yeah, it's really not, I don't think it's honest to do that. And if he believes that it's genocide, he should say it. And he should say that Israel should recognize genocide, and he should, as president of Israel, he should fight for the recognition of Israel, over genocide by Israel. But he should not say, I believe it, but it's my personal opinion, but I can't say it.
His belief must give him a commitment for pursuing the cause.
He should have the courage to speak out, speak what he believes.
Because this is not enough.
Right.
This is not enough.
Yeah. So that was the meeting this morning.
To what extent do you think it is important for Armenia and for the cause of the Armenian genocide that Israel actually recognizes it in the official level? And to what extent do you think, if in case it happens, it will affect the recognition of the genocide by the United States in one way or another?
Yeah. Well, as I said in my speech, first of all, I believe that the recognition stage is over. We already have enough recognition. So any country that has not recognized yet, it's too bad. I think the recognition stage is over. We don't need any more recognition by anybody, I don't care who they are. And for the United States, I said that the United States has repeatedly recognized genocide.
Yes.
We have two resolutions in the U.S. Congress passed in 1975, 1984. We have the President Reagan issued a proclamation in 1981. We have a document that the U.S. government sent to the World Court in 1951. And we have 43 out of 50 states have recognized it. So I think we have all the recognition we need. In terms of Israel, at this point, I think if Israel recognizes, it's more important for Israel to recognize for themselves than for us, because at this point it's too late for them to recognize and be important for us. We already have international recognition. The UN recognizes, European Parliament recognizes, all these 25 countries recognize. International Holocaust and Genocide scholars recognize. So we have recognition. Adding 100 years of recognition, we can't spend in the next 100 years getting recognition. It's just a waste of time. We need to go to court and ask for our demands, our lands, our properties, our churches, our schools, our cemeteries. So that's what we should do. Now, you know, the reason Israel is interesting and important is because they suffered Holocaust, suffered similar fate. So they should be very anxious to recognize it's the right thing to do. It's not so much what we gain from it. It's the proper thing to do. And because for years they've been saying no, no, no. And if one day they say yes, it will upset the Turks very much. So when the Turks are upset, we're happy.
Yes, and to what extent that is a big factor is another question.
No, it doesn't change much. It doesn't change much. It makes some of us feel better that Israel finally recognized it. That's all. But I think Israel has more to gain than us if they recognize, because then they'll be more respected. Because how can they fight denial of the Holocaust and yet they deny the genocide of another nation?
They are basically denialists themselves in this position.
So they cannot fight Holocaust denial if they don't accept the genocide themselves.
Okay. Is there any other comment you would like to make about this in these days?
For Armenians right now, the most important thing is really none of these things. The most important thing is that every Armenian should pass on to the next generation what happened to us and what we lost and what we want to gain back. Because if we don't teach this to the next generation, even if one day some Turkish leader, a nice person, 50 years, 100 years, 20 years from now says, yes, we commit genocide and now we give all your lands back, but if our children and grandchildren don't know that those lands belong to us, no one's going to go back, no one's going to even know what it is. So all this struggle is for nothing. So the Jews spent 2,000 years by saying to each generation, next year in Jerusalem, next year in Jerusalem.
Yes,
so Armenians have to say next year in Van for maybe not 2,000 years, maybe a couple of more generations until something changes. There's an opportunity, because if something changes in the geography of the area, and Armenians are not ready, Armenians don't know that it's their land, it's useless. There are millions of Kurds there, they will take the land. So we need to be informed. We need to educate our next generation. That's in our hand. You know, whether we can get land or not, that's not in our hand. But teaching our children, that's something in our hand we can do. So there's no excuse for not passing on the lessons. So we should say next year in Van, next year in Van, each generation.
Yeah, sure.
So the Jews did it for 2,000 years, and look, they got to their dream.
And also it unites.
Yeah, and then Armenians also should do the same thing. They should keep up the dream, because just because we lost everything, it doesn't mean that we should also lose the dream. We lost everything, but at least let's keep the dream alive. It's very important to keep the dream alive, because you can accomplish things by dreaming about it. If you lose the dream, then you lost everything.
Yeah. So let's keep on.
Okay.
Thank you.